She ordered her own euthanasia, but a billionaire's actions changed everything. A young woman, tired of fighting a painful illness, signs the papers to end her life tomorrow morning. She thinks it's over. She thinks nobody will stop her. But just hours before her final moment, a powerful stranger forces the entire clinic to shut down and says she can't die yet. He tells her she carries something inside her body that could save millions, and he'll risk everything to protect her. But as she's pulled into a hidden world of danger, secrets, and people who want her gone forever, she realizes stopping her death may have just put her in even greater danger. Why did this billionaire really save her? And what terrifying truth is he still not telling her? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The fluorescent lights of Briarwood Medical Center hummed overhead as Ruby Carrow's trembling fingers gripped her worn leather purse. Her steps were unsteady, each movement a careful negotiation between will and pain as she made her way through the sterile hallway. At 28 years old, she had long ago memorized the precise number of steps from the entrance to Dr. Marshall's office. 47 when her legs cooperated, 63 on bad days like today. The morning sun filtered through the windows, casting long shadows that seemed to mirror the darkness in her heart. Ruby's hand shook as she pressed the elevator button, not from her condition this time, but from the weight of what she was about to do. Inside the empty elevator, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirrored walls, a thin black woman with tired eyes that had aged beyond their years, hair pulled back in a neat bun that took all her energy to style this morning. Just another form, she whispered to herself, though they both knew it was a lie. This wasn't like the countless insurance papers or treatment authorizations she'd signed over the years. This was different. Final. The neurologist's waiting room was quiet, save for the gentle ticking of the wall clock and the soft tapping of the receptionist's keyboard. Ruby signed in, her signature more of a scrawl than it used to be, and sank into a chair, her body protesting every movement. She remembered sitting in these same chairs years ago with her father, his strong hand covering hers, his deep voice asking questions she was too scared to voice. Now the chair beside her sat empty, just as it had for the past 3 years. The memory of their last real conversation crashed over her like a wave. "I can't watch you suffer anymore, baby girl," he had said, his voice cracking. But Ruby had heard what she wanted to hear, that she was too much, too broken, too heavy a burden. So she had pushed him away, ignored his calls, moved to a smaller apartment across town. It was easier that way, she told herself. Easier to disappear than to see the pain in his eyes. "Miss Carrow." The nurse's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Dr. Marshall will see you now." The consultation room felt smaller than usual, the walls closer, the air thicker. Dr. Marshall's kind eyes watched as Ruby settled into the chair across from his desk, where a single document waited. The euthanasia consent form was deceptively simple, just a few pages of legal text and signature lines that would end years of suffering. "Ruby," Dr. Marshall began gently, "are you sure about this decision? Have you discussed it with your family?" Ruby's laugh was hollow. "There's no one left to discuss it with." She thought of her father's number, still programmed into her phone, undialed for so long. Everyone's better off this way. The pen felt heavy in her hand as she signed her name on each marked line. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. The time of death, scheduled as easily as a dental appointment. Afterward, Ruby found herself in the hospital courtyard, the late morning sun warming her face. She sat on a bench surrounded by carefully tended flowers, irises and daylilies that reminded her of her mother's garden before the illness took even those memories from her. The years rolled through her mind like a bitter film reel. The first symptoms at 23, dropped cups, trembling hands, unexplained pain. The diagnosis at 24 that sent her world spinning off its axis. The progression that followed was relentless. The walking cane at 25, the wheelchair kept in her car trunk for bad days, the medications that made her sick but never made her better. She remembered the faces of friends who slowly stopped calling, the church members who offered prayers but stepped back when the reality of chronic illness became too uncomfortable. Their awkward smiles and hollow promises to catch up soon had hurt more than the disease itself. "I'm doing them a favor," Ruby whispered to the flowers, trying to convince herself. No more cancelled plans, no more asking for help, no more watching me fade away. The sun was setting by the time Ruby made it back to her small apartment. The space that had once felt like a sanctuary now seemed to mock her with its emptiness. She moved methodically through the rooms, sorting her belongings into donation boxes. Her favorite books, carefully packed, someone else could find comfort in their pages. Her clothes folded neatly, they could keep someone else warm. Her mother's quilts, her collection of cross necklaces from better days, all categorized and labeled with precise instructions. The letter was the hardest part. Ruby sat at her small kitchen table, pen hovering over paper, words struggling to form. How do you say goodbye to someone you pushed away? How do you explain that leaving was an act of love? "Dear Daddy," she wrote, her handwriting shaky but determined. "I'm sorry I made you watch me suffer. I'm sorry I couldn't be stronger. I'm sorry I pushed you away when all you wanted to do was help. I hope someday you'll understand that this was my gift to you, freedom from the burden of a broken daughter." The words blurred as tears fell onto the paper, but she forced herself to finish, to explain, to apologize, to say all the things she'd been too afraid to say face to face. Night had fully settled when Ruby finally prepared for bed. Her movements were slow, deliberate, each action a small battle against pain and fatigue. The appointment card sat on her nightstand, its simple white surface holding the weight of tomorrow's promise. 9 o'clock. The end of pain. The end of being a burden. The end. Ruby lay in her bed, eyes fixed on that small rectangle of paper, until exhaustion won out over anxiety. As sleep began to pull at her consciousness, her last thought was of her father's hands, strong, gentle, always ready to catch her when she fell. Now, for the first time, she would fall without him. The appointment card remained in her line of sight until her heavy eyelids finally closed, the numbers 9 o'clock burning behind them like a timer counting down to morning. The early morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Asher Vale's private laboratory, casting long shadows across the polished steel surfaces. The billionaire inventor sat hunched over his desk, his usually pristine appearance showing signs of strain. His tie hung loosely around his neck, and his dark hair was disheveled from running his fingers through it countless times. Before him lay a stack of genetic test results, each one representing a potential lifeline for his sister Miriam. The reports had arrived anonymously from a nationwide clinical trial, and Asher had been reviewing them for hours, his eyes burning from the strain of reading endless columns of data. "There has to be something here," he muttered, reaching for his fourth cup of coffee. His sister's condition was worsening by the day, and conventional treatments had proven useless against the rare neurological disorder that was slowly stealing her away. The morning light grew stronger as Asher methodically worked through the files. Each disappointing result felt like another door closing, another hope extinguished. But he couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop. Not while Miriam still needed him. His attention suddenly focused on a file labeled Cairo Ruby. Something about the numbers made him sit up straighter, his fatigue forgotten. He pulled up the digital version on his computer screen, enlarging the genetic markers that had caught his eye. "This can't be right," he whispered, leaning closer to the screen. The neural regeneration markers were off the charts, impossible levels for someone supposedly in late-stage decline. His fingers flew across the keyboard, initiating deeper analysis protocols. "Dr. Chen," he called out to his lead researcher, "I need a rush comparison on these protein markers. Priority 1. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Asher paced the laboratory floor as his team worked, his mind racing with possibilities. If these results were accurate, Ruby Caro's body was producing a regenerative protein unlike anything they'd ever seen. This could be the breakthrough they'd been searching for. "Mr. Vale," his assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The preliminary results are ready." Asher nearly knocked over his chair in his haste to reach the analysis station. The data confirmed his initial observations. Ruby's genetic structure contained something extraordinary, something that could potentially revolutionize treatment for conditions like Miriam's. "Pull up her current medical status," he ordered, already thinking about contact protocols. "We need to reach out immediately." The words died in his throat as he read the screen. "Scheduled euthanasia. 9 a.m. tomorrow morning." No, he muttered, pulling out his phone. His fingers shook slightly as he dialed his legal team. "This is Asher Vale. I need immediate action on an experimental patient protection clause. Yes, it's urgent. Life or death urgent." While his legal team mobilized, Asher contacted his government liaison, Marcus Thompson. "Marcus, I'm calling in every favor you owe me. I need the fastest possible activation of Protection Clause 473. Yes, I understand it's rarely used. That's why I need you, specifically." The day progressed in a whirlwind of activity. Asher's normally quiet laboratory hummed with urgent energy as his team prepared documentation. Legal briefs were drafted and filed. Government officials were contacted, all while the clock ticked steadily toward tomorrow morning. As the sun began to set, Asher reviewed the final paperwork that would halt the euthanasia order. His signature was steady despite his exhaustion. He couldn't fail. Not with 2 lives potentially hanging in the balance, Ruby's and Miriam's. "The helicopter is ready, sir," his assistant informed him. "Weather conditions are optimal for the flight to Briarwood Medical Center." Asher gathered the documents into his briefcase, checking one final time that everything was in order. The weight of what he was about to do, intervening in a stranger's chosen death, wasn't lost on him. But the potential within Ruby's genes could save not just his sister, but countless others. He couldn't let that hope die without at least trying. The helicopter waited on the rooftop landing pad, its blades already spinning in the dusk light. Asher's coat whipped around him as he strode toward it, his determination growing with each step. The city sprawled below him, lights beginning to twinkle in the growing darkness. As he settled into his seat, Asher checked his watch. There were still hours until Ruby's scheduled appointment, but every minute counted. He nodded to the pilot, and the helicopter lifted off into the darkening sky. Below him, the city lights blurred together as they gained altitude, while, ahead, the distance between him and Briarwood Medical Center grew steadily shorter. Ruby opened her eyes before her alarm could sound, just as the first hints of dawn were creeping through her window blinds. She lay still for a moment, taking in the quiet of what she knew would be her final morning. The familiar ache in her joints reminded her why she had chosen this day, this ending. With careful, deliberate movements, she pushed herself up from the bed. Her hands trembled. They always did now, but she took her time getting dressed. She had chosen her clothes the night before, soft grey pants, her favorite cream-colored sweater that still smelled faintly of home, clean socks without holes, small dignities for her final hours. The morning light grew stronger as she brushed her teeth and combed her hair. In the bathroom mirror, she caught glimpses of her younger self, the bright-eyed girl who had once dreamed of standing in front of a classroom full of children, sharing her love of literature and learning. That dream had withered slowly, just like her body, as the disease progressed. First the subtle tremors, then the growing weakness, until even holding a book steady became a challenge. Ruby's taxi arrived exactly on time, 8:15 in the morning. The driver helped her into the back seat without comment, perhaps used to taking patients to Briarwood Medical Center. As they drove through the quiet morning streets, memories washed over her like gentle waves. She remembered sitting on her father's lap in church, his deep voice rumbling through her small body as he sang hymns. The proud smile on his face when she graduated high school, already accepted into the teaching program at the state university. The way his eyes had filled with tears the first time she fell in public, her legs suddenly refusing to support her. The growing distance between them as her condition worsened, until their conversations became short, awkward exchanges filled with things left unsaid. The taxi pulled up to the medical center's entrance at 8:45. A nurse was waiting with a wheelchair, standard protocol, though Ruby could still walk with effort. The familiar institutional smell of antiseptic and clean linens surrounded her as they made their way through quiet corridors to a private room. "Good morning, Ruby." Nurse Danielle greeted her with gentle warmth. "I'm here to help you through the preparation process. Would you like some water before we begin?" Ruby shook her head, settling into the comfortable chair provided. The room was designed to feel peaceful. Soft lighting, calm blue walls, a small window looking out onto a garden. Nurse Danielle pulled up a chair beside her, holding a clipboard with several forms. "I'll explain each step," the nurse said, her voice steady and compassionate. "The procedure itself is very peaceful. First, we'll administer a mild sedative to help you relax. Then, once you're ready, the doctor will—" Ruby listened, carefully, though she already knew the details. She had researched everything extensively before making her decision. Her hand shook as she signed the final waiver, but her resolve was firm. This was her choice, her last act of control over a body that had betrayed her. The clock on the wall showed 8:57. Just a few more minutes. Ruby thought, closing her eyes. She could almost feel the peace waiting for her, the end of pain, the release of being a burden to those she loved. The door burst open with such force that both Ruby and Nurse Danielle jumped. 3 people in business suits strode in, followed by security personnel and hospital administrators. A woman in a charcoal grey suit stepped forward, holding out official-looking documents. "I apologize for the interruption, but I have an emergency injunction halting this procedure," she announced, her voice clipped and professional. "Under Research Protection Grounds, Section 473, this euthanasia cannot proceed." Ruby stared at them, uncomprehending. "What? I don't understand. I have every right to—" "Your rights aren't in question, Ms. Caro," another official interjected. "But there are larger factors at play. This is a legal halt order. The procedure cannot proceed." Confusion gave way to humiliation as Ruby realized what was happening. Strangers were stepping in to take away her choice, her dignity, her peaceful ending. Tears burned in her eyes as Nurse Danielle looked helplessly between her and the officials. Before anyone could say more, another figure appeared in the doorway. Tall, well-dressed, with an air of authority that made everyone else step aside. He moved directly to Ruby's chair, his expression both apologetic and determined. "Ms. Caro, I'm Asher Vale," he said quietly, kneeling beside her chair to meet her eyes. "I'm so sorry for disrupting things this way. I know this is shocking and upsetting, but I had no choice. There's something incredibly important we need to discuss." Ruby looked at him through her tears, her whole body trembling now, not just from her condition, but from the overwhelming emotion of having her carefully planned ending ripped away. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, breaking with pain and confusion. "Why won't you let me die?" The silence in the pre-procedure room felt heavy as Ruby stared up at Asher Vale, tears still glistening on her cheeks. The morning sunlight filtering through the window cast shadows across his concerned face as he remained kneeling beside her chair. "Ms. Carrow," Asher began gently, "I know this is overwhelming, but what I discovered in your medical files could change everything, not just for you, but for countless others suffering from similar conditions." Ruby wrapped her arms around herself, her shoulders trembling. "My files? You had no right to look at my private medical information." "You're absolutely right," Asher acknowledged, keeping his voice low and steady. "I was conducting research for my sister Miriam. She has the same condition you do. When your test results came across my desk anonymously from a clinical trial database, I found something extraordinary in your genetic makeup." "So I'm just a lab specimen to you?" Ruby's voice cracked with hurt and anger. "Some kind of scientific discovery? I never asked to be rescued. This was my choice, my decision." Nurse Danielle stepped forward protectively, but Asher raised his hand. "Would you allow me to show you the evidence? You deserve to understand exactly what we found before making any decisions. I'm not here to force anything on you. I just want you to have all the information." Ruby wiped her eyes with shaking hands, looking around at the crowd of officials still hovering anxiously in the doorway. The morning she had planned so carefully was shattered, but curiosity began to edge through her disappointment and anger. "Fine," she said finally. "Show me. But just you, not your whole entourage." Asher nodded, standing up. "Of course. Is there a private consultation room we could use?" he asked Nurse Danielle. The nurse led them to a smaller room down the hall, furnished with comfortable chairs and a computer workstation. Ruby sank into one of the cushioned seats while Asher pulled up digital files on the screen. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a complex diagram of neural pathways. "This is a typical scan from someone with advanced neurodegeneration." He pulled up another image. "And this is yours. Do you see the difference in these areas?" Ruby leaned forward despite herself. Where the first scan showed dark, deteriorating sections, her scan had spots of bright activity. "What does it mean?" "Your body is producing a unique protein that appears to be fighting the degeneration," Asher explained. "We've never seen anything like it. The implications for treatment are enormous." His eyes lit up with careful hope as he continued. "With your permission, we could study this protein, understand how it works, and potentially develop treatments that could help millions of people, including my sister." As Ruby studied the scans, trying to process this unexpected turn of events, a sharp alarm suddenly cut through the air. Red warning lights began flashing in the hallway outside their door. "Security alert!" a voice announced over the intercom. "Unauthorized access detected in Records Department, initiating partial lockdown procedures." The door burst open as Security Chief Dawson strode in, his expression grim. "Mr. Vale, we need to move you and Ms. Carrow to a secure location immediately. We have multiple intruders attempting to breach the records section." Ruby's eyes widened in alarm as Dawson and another security officer moved to escort them out. "What's happening?" "Stay close to me," Asher said quietly, helping her up from her chair. The tremors in her legs were worse now from stress and fatigue. They hurried down the corridors. More alarms sounded throughout the building. Security personnel spoke urgently into radios, coordinating their response to the breach. Ruby could hear the tension in their voices. As they rounded a corner toward the secure wing, Asher kept his hand supportively under Ruby's elbow. His face had grown serious, and he leaned close to whisper words that made her blood run cold. Someone knows what you are, and they want you. Ruby stumbled slightly, her knees threatening to give out as the implications hit her. This morning, she had been prepared to quietly end her life. Now she was running from unknown threats, carrying a secret in her genes that apparently made her valuable enough to steal medical records for. The sterile hospital hallway seemed to spin around her as security rushed them forward, away from whatever danger was closing in behind them. Security Chief Dawson led Ruby and Asher through a series of restricted corridors, moving swiftly downward via service elevators to the hospital's underground levels. Ruby's legs trembled with each step, her body protesting the unexpected exertion. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows as they hurried past storage rooms and maintenance areas. "The secure garage is just ahead," Dawson announced, speaking into his radio. "Vehicle status?" "SUV ready and waiting, sir," crackled the response. "Perimeter secured." Ruby's mind spun as she tried to process how drastically her carefully planned final day had derailed. Just hours ago, she had been prepared for peace, for an end to her suffering. Now she was being rushed through basement corridors like some kind of fugitive. "This is insane," she muttered, her voice breaking. "I came here to die peacefully, not to be chased by whoever these people are. I never asked for any of this." Asher turned to her, his expression grave but gentle. "I know this is overwhelming, but whoever targeted your medical records won't stop there. If they're willing to breach a hospital's security for your file, they'll come after you next. I promise you'll have choices once you're safe, but right now, we need to move." They emerged into a concrete garage lit by rows of fluorescent tubes. A black armored SUV idled near the exit, surrounded by security personnel in tactical gear. The vehicle's reinforced windows gleamed dully under the harsh lighting. Ruby stopped short, her legs nearly giving out. I can't do this. This morning I was saying goodbye to the world, and now you want me to run from it." "Ms. Caro." Asher's voice was quiet but urgent. "I give you my word. Once we've ensured your safety, if you still wish to walk away, I won't stop you. But please, let me protect you until then." She looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. Despite his wealth and power, there was something earnest in his eyes that made her want to trust him. Or maybe she was just too exhausted to fight anymore. "Fine," she whispered, "but I want that in writing later." A ghost of a smile crossed Asher's face as he helped her toward the waiting vehicle. "I'll have my lawyers draft it immediately." The SUV's door opened to reveal a plush interior with comfortable leather seats. Ruby sank into the back row, her body grateful for the support. Asher slid in beside her, while armed security took positions in front and behind their vehicle. As they pulled out of the garage via a secure exit, Ruby watched the hospital disappear behind them. The morning sun felt surreal after the fluorescent basement lighting. She had expected this to be her last sunrise. "I know you have questions," Asher said softly. "Let me explain what we know so far." Ruby nodded wearily, her anger temporarily subdued by exhaustion. "Someone attempted to access your medical records specifically," he continued. "They knew exactly what they were looking for, which means they likely know about your unique genetic markers. The fact that they risked a daylight breach of a hospital's secure systems suggests both resources and desperation. But why?" Ruby's voice was barely above a whisper. I'm dying. I was supposed to be gone by now." "You're far more remarkable than you realize," Asher replied. "The protein your body produces could revolutionize treatment for millions of people with neurological conditions. That makes you incredibly valuable, both to those who want to help people and to those who might want to profit from it." Ruby stared out the window as they merged onto the highway, heading toward the outskirts of the city. The familiar buildings of her neighborhood slipped past, perhaps for the last time. Her eyelids felt impossibly heavy. "Where are we going?" she managed to ask. "I have a private airstrip about 40 minutes from here. We'll take my helicopter to a secure research facility where we can protect you properly." Asher glanced at her with concern. "Try to rest. You're safe now." Ruby wanted to argue, to demand more answers, but her body had other plans. The gentle motion of the vehicle and the quiet hum of its engine conspired with her exhaustion. Her head nodded forward as sleep claimed her, the events of this impossible morning fading into dreams. The sun had set by the time they reached the airstrip. Ruby remained deeply asleep, her body compensating for the physical and emotional strain of the day. Asher's security team moved with practiced efficiency, carefully transferring her from the SUV to the waiting helicopter. Medical staff secured her safely for the flight, while monitoring her vital signs. Asher watched as the helicopter's rotors began to spin, their rhythmic beating drowning out the night sounds. As they lifted off into the darkness, Ruby slept on, unaware she was being carried away from everything she had known, toward an uncertain future that might hold more hope than she dared to imagine. The lights of the city fell away beneath them as the helicopter banked toward their secure destination, carrying its precious cargo into the night sky. Sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, casting gentle shadows across Ruby's face. Her eyes fluttered open, then widened in confusion. This wasn't her apartment. Instead of her familiar worn furniture, she found herself in a spacious room with honey-colored wood walls and oversized windows framing a stunning mountain view. Ruby sat up slowly, her body stiff but surprisingly comfortable in the plush, queen-sized bed. The events of yesterday crashed back into her memory. The clinic, Asher Vale, the security breach, the car ride. But how had she gotten here? She swung her legs over the side of the bed, noticing she was still wearing yesterday's clothes. The carpet felt soft beneath her bare feet as she explored the room. At first glance, it looked like an upscale mountain retreat. Tasteful artwork, comfortable furnishings, warm lighting. But closer inspection revealed subtle technological additions. What appeared to be a decorative mirror held a medical monitoring display, currently dormant. The bedside lamp concealed sensors, and discreet cameras were positioned in the corners. "Good morning, Ms. Caro." Ruby startled at the voice. Asher Vale stood in the doorway, wearing a casual sweater that made him look more approachable than yesterday's business attire. "Where am I?" Ruby asked, wrapping her arms around herself. "You're at my private medical facility in the Blue Ridge Mountains," Asher explained, staying by the door to give her space. "I apologize for not waking you during the transfer, but you needed the rest. You're completely safe here." Ruby moved to the window, taking in the endless sea of trees stretching toward misty peaks. "It's beautiful," she admitted reluctantly, "but also very isolated." "That's intentional. We can better protect you here." Asher's expression softened. "There's someone I'd like you to meet, if you're feeling up to it." Ruby nodded hesitantly. Asher stepped aside, and a woman appeared in the doorway. She looked to be in her early 40s, with Asher's same dark hair and kind eyes. She moved carefully, leaning on an elegant wooden cane. "Ruby, this is my sister, Dr. Miriam Vale. Miriam, Ruby Caro." Miriam's smile lit up her whole face. "Ruby, I'm so glad to meet you. Please forgive my slow movement. We share similar challenges with mobility." Something in Miriam's warm demeanor made Ruby's tension ease slightly. Unlike the clinical interactions she was used to, Miriam's presence felt genuinely welcoming. "Would you like to get cleaned up and have some breakfast?" Miriam asked. "We've prepared a suite for you with everything you might need. No pressure or rush. This is your space now." Ruby glanced down at her rumpled clothes from yesterday. "That would be nice, thank you." Through that door you'll find a full bathroom and closet. Miriam explained. We weren't sure of your preferences, so we included a variety of comfortable options. Take your time. When you're ready, just press the intercom by the door and someone will show you to the dining room. After they left, Ruby explored the attached bathroom, finding it fully stocked with premium toiletries. The walk-in closet held an array of clothing in her size, everything from loungewear to business casual attire. She selected soft black yoga pants and an oversized cream sweater, then took a long, hot shower. As the water soothed her muscles, Ruby tried to process her new reality. 24 hours ago, she had been preparing to die. Now she was in a hidden mountain facility, apparently valuable enough to protect. It felt surreal. Following a quiet breakfast of fresh fruit and warm pastries, Ruby was introduced to Dr. Reeves, the facility's lead physician. He was a tall man in his 50s with graying temples and wire-rimmed glasses. While unfailingly polite, his manner held a clinical distance that contrasted sharply with Miriam's warmth. We'll need to run some baseline tests, he explained, leading Ruby to the medical wing. Nothing invasive today. Just scans and blood work to establish your current status. The examination room, though filled with advanced equipment, had been designed to feel less institutional. Warm lighting and natural wood accents softened the medical necessities. As Dr. Reeves conducted his examination, Ruby found herself gradually relaxing. His movements were efficient but gentle, and he explained each step clearly. Your readings are quite remarkable, he commented, studying a display. The regenerative markers in your system are unlike anything I've seen before. We have much to learn from you, Ms. Caro. Something in his tone made Ruby uncomfortable, though she couldn't pinpoint why. Before she could dwell on it, there was a soft knock at the door. Miriam entered, smiling warmly. I thought you might like to join me for afternoon tea on the porch, she offered. It's my favorite time of day here. Ruby gratefully accepted the escape. They made their way to a covered wraparound porch, where a small table had been set with tea and light refreshments. The mountain air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine trees. Miriam poured tea into delicate china cups. Sugar? Honey? Just plain is fine, Ruby replied, watching as Miriam's hands trembled slightly while handling the teapot. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun sink toward the mountain peaks. The sky was painted in stunning shades of pink and gold. I never expected to see another sunset, Ruby said quietly, surprising herself with the admission. Miriam reached across the table and squeezed her hand. God works in mysterious ways, dear one. Sometimes when we think we're at the end of our story, we're actually at a new beginning. Ruby felt tears prick at her eyes. I didn't think anyone would care if I lived or died. I thought I was doing everyone a favor by leaving. Oh, Ruby. Miriam's voice was filled with compassion. Your life has more value than you can imagine, not just because of your unique biology, but because of who you are. I hope you'll let us show you that. As the sun dipped below the mountains, Ruby sipped her tea and let Miriam's words sink in. For the first time in years, she felt a tiny spark of something she had thought was gone forever. Hope. The morning sun filtered through the treatment room's windows as Ruby sat on the edge of the medical chair, her heart beating quickly. Dr. Reeves and his team were setting up equipment that looked more like spa accessories than medical devices. Soft pads connected to gently humming machines, warm blankets, and monitoring screens disguised within wooden cabinets. The regenerative stimulation process is completely non-invasive, Dr. Reeves explained, his clinical tone softened slightly today. Think of it as waking up sleeping cells in your body. You might feel some warmth or tingling, but there shouldn't be any pain. Ruby nodded, trying to calm her nerves. A young nurse with kind eyes helped her recline in the chair, positioning the stimulation pads along her arms and legs where the numbness was worst. "We'll start very slowly," the nurse assured her. "You can tell us to stop at any time." As the treatment began, Ruby closed her eyes, focusing on her breathing like she used to do in church. At first she felt nothing. Then gradually, a gentle warmth began spreading through her limbs. It reminded her of sitting in sunlight on a spring morning. "How are you feeling?" Dr. Reeves asked, monitoring the readings. "There's warmth," Ruby said softly. "In places I haven't felt anything for years." The sensation grew stronger, not uncomfortable but strange after so much numbness. Then she felt it, a slight tingling in her fingertips, like tiny sparkles of electricity. Ruby's eyes widened. "I can feel my fingers," she whispered, wiggling them slightly. "Really feel them." The medical team shared excited glances. Dr. Reeves made notes on his tablet, trying to maintain his professional demeanor despite the hint of a smile touching his lips. After the treatment, Asher was waiting outside. "How did it go?" "I felt something," Ruby told him, still amazed. Actual sensation where there was nothing before. Asher's face lit up. "Would you like to see more of the sanctuary? You might feel up for a short walk after the treatment." Ruby nodded, surprised to find she did feel stronger. As they walked through the facility, Asher pointed out different areas. The building seamlessly blended medical technology with natural elements. Large windows, indoor plants, and flowing water features created a peaceful atmosphere. They stepped outside into a gorgeous garden filled with flowering plants and winding paths. "This is our therapeutic garden," Asher explained. "Miriam helped design it. She believes healing isn't just about medical treatments, it's about nurturing the whole person." Ruby trailed her fingers along a smooth wooden railing, savoring the fact that she could feel the texture. "Your sister is remarkable," she said quietly. "How long has she been sick?" Asher's expression grew serious. 5 years. I've spent every day since her diagnosis searching for a cure." He paused, looking out over the garden. "I should have found it sooner. Every day she suffers is because I haven't been smart enough or fast enough." "That's not fair to yourself," Ruby said softly. "You've created all of this to help her. And yet she still struggles to walk some days." He replied, his voice tight with emotion. "Still lives with constant pain." They were quiet for a moment, the garden's fountain providing gentle background noise. Finally, Ruby spoke. "My father. He withdrew when I got sick, stopped coming to my appointments, barely spoke to me. I thought he was ashamed of me, disappointed that his only daughter had become a burden." Asher turned to her, listening intently. "I pushed him away too," Ruby continued. "Stopped answering his calls. It was easier to be alone than to see the pain in his eyes. Eventually, I convinced myself everyone would be better off if I just disappeared." "Is that why you chose euthanasia?" Asher asked gently. Ruby nodded, wiping away a tear. "I thought I was being brave, making the hard choice so others wouldn't have to take care of me anymore. But maybe I was just scared of living." They continued walking, passing through different sections of the sanctuary. Asher showed her the physical therapy rooms, equipped with state-of-the-art rehabilitation equipment. The research labs, visible through large windows, hummed with activity as scientists worked. "Everything here is focused on healing and hope," Asher explained. "Not just the medical aspects, but helping people rediscover their worth." By evening, Ruby joined the team in the dining room. The space was warm and inviting, more like a family home than a medical facility. Miriam was already seated at the large table, arranging flowers in a crystal vase. "These are from the garden," she explained as Ruby sat down. I thought they'd brighten up our dinner." The meal was delicious. Fresh vegetables, tender chicken, and warm bread. Ruby found herself relaxing as conversation flowed naturally around the table. When Miriam told a funny story about Asher's first attempts at cooking, Ruby actually laughed out loud, a sound she hadn't heard from herself in months. "You should have seen him," Miriam giggled. "Covered in flour, smoke everywhere, and he still insisted he could figure it out without looking at a recipe." "In my defense," Asher protested, "I approach cooking like engineering. It's all about precise measurements and chemical reactions. Except you forgot that recipes exist for a reason." Miriam teased, making Ruby laugh again. Later that night, Ruby lay in her bed, reflecting on the day. The warmth from the treatment still lingered in her limbs, and she realized with surprise that her usual evening pain was noticeably less intense. She flexed her fingers, marveling at the increased sensation. Tomorrow was still uncertain, but for the first time in years, uncertainty didn't feel like a threat. Instead, it felt like possibility. Ruby closed her eyes, letting the mountain quiet surround her, wondering what new sensations and experiences the next day might bring. The morning sun streamed through Ruby's window, casting warm patterns across her bed. It was her third day at the sanctuary, and already her body felt different. Not healed, not yet, but changed. As she dressed for physical therapy, she noticed her hands trembled less than usual. The therapy room was flooded with natural light, equipment arranged thoughtfully to create an inviting space. Sarah, her physical therapist, greeted her with an encouraging smile. "Ready to test those reflexes?" Sarah asked, setting up simple coordination exercises. Ruby nodded, settling into position. The first test involved catching soft balls tossed at varying speeds, something that would have been impossible just days ago. To her amazement, her hands responded more quickly than before, managing to catch 7 out of 10 throws. "That's incredible improvement," Sarah noted, making entries in her tablet. "Your reaction time has increased by 30% since your baseline." Ruby stared at her hands in wonder. "I can feel more too. The texture of things, temperature differences." As they continued through the morning's exercises, Ruby heard familiar footsteps approaching. Asher appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, as usual. "How's our star patient doing?" he asked, though his eyes were already scanning the monitoring displays. "Working too hard, as usual," Ruby teased, echoing what she'd heard Miriam say about him countless times. "Do you ever take breaks?" A slight smile tugged at his mouth. "I could ask you the same thing. Though speaking of breaks..." He set his tablet down. "What kind of music do you like? We should add some to your therapy sessions." The question caught Ruby off guard. It had been so long since anyone had asked about her preferences, her likes and dislikes. "Gospel, mainly. And some jazz. My father used to play Miles Davis records on Sunday afternoons." "I'll download some for tomorrow," Asher promised, making a note. These small gestures of thoughtfulness had become frequent, each one helping Ruby feel more like a person and less like a patient. Later that afternoon, as Ruby walked down the hallway toward the lab for routine tests, she noticed Dr. Reeves watching her through the glass partition. Though he smiled and waved pleasantly, something in his gaze made her uneasy. It was too intense, too calculating, like she was a specimen rather than a person. She returned his wave quickly and hurried past. As the day progressed, Ruby felt stronger than she had in years. Perhaps too strong. During her evening therapy walk with Asher around the sanctuary grounds, she pushed herself to go further than usual. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks as they followed the wooded path. "The view up here never gets old," she remarked, pausing to catch her breath. "Miriam chose this location." Asher explained. She said healing should be beautiful as well as effective. Ruby took another step forward, but her legs suddenly wobbled beneath her. The world tilted sideways as her knees buckled. Before she could fall, Asher's arms were around her, supporting her weight. "I've got you," he said quickly, his voice tight with concern. "I've got you." Ruby steadied herself against him, feeling the rapid beating of his heart. In that moment, she realized this brilliant, reserved man was terrified, not of her falling, but of losing her entirely. "I'm okay," she assured him softly. "Just try to do too much. Please be careful," he whispered, still holding her securely. I can't lose you now." Once she was stable, they made their way back inside. Ruby was touched by his obvious concern, so different from his usual controlled demeanor. "You know," she said as they reached her room, "I'm starting to believe I might actually make it. That sounds strange to say out loud, considering where I was just days ago." Asher's expression softened. "It's not strange at all. It's hope." That evening, Ruby joined Miriam in the sanctuary's small chapel for evening prayers. The intimate space was lit by soft lamplight, creating a peaceful atmosphere. Several other patients and staff members formed a circle, holding hands. As Miriam led them in prayer, Ruby felt something stir deep within her, a familiar warmth she hadn't experienced in years. Faith had seemed impossible during her darkest days, but here, surrounded by gentle voices lifted in hope, she felt it awakening again. "Dear Lord," Miriam prayed, her voice full of quiet conviction, "we thank you for bringing us together in healing and hope. Watch over each person here, guide the hands that treat us, and help us remember we are never alone in our struggles." Ruby squeezed Miriam's hand, tears sliding down her cheeks. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. Later that night, Ruby prepared for bed, her body tired but her spirit lighter than it had been in years. As she drifted off to sleep, she was unaware of Dr. Reeves in his office, carefully encrypting data files and attaching them to an email. His fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, sending information about Ruby's remarkable progress to an unnamed recipient, his expression unreadable in the blue glow of the computer screen. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the imaging room as Ruby lay still inside the advanced scanner. The gentle humming of the machine filled the space as Dr. Chen carefully monitored the detailed neural readings appearing on her screen. Ruby's heart beat steadily, a mixture of nervousness and hope coursing through her as she waited. "Just a few more minutes," Dr. Chen said softly through the intercom. "You're doing wonderfully, Ruby." Ruby closed her eyes, remembering how different things had been just days ago. She had walked into a clinic prepared to die, and now here she was, watching her body heal in ways she hadn't dared to dream possible. The scanner completed its cycle, and Dr. Chen helped Ruby sit up slowly. "Let me pull up the comparison images," she said, her usually calm voice holding a note of excitement. Miriam and Asher entered the room just as Dr. Chen brought the scans up on the large wall display. Ruby's breath caught in her throat as she saw the images side by side, her neural pathways from a week ago compared to now. "Do you see these connections here?" Dr. Chen pointed to several brightly lit areas. These neural pathways were previously degraded, but now... She traced the glowing lines with her finger. "They're regenerating, reconnecting. It's remarkable progress, Ruby." Ruby stared at the image, her vision blurring as tears welled up in her eyes. "They're really healing?" she whispered. "Yes," Dr. Chen confirmed, her face glowing with professional satisfaction. "The regenerative treatment is working better than we could have hoped. These new connections explain why you've been experiencing improved mobility and decreased pain." The tears spilled over then, running down Ruby's cheeks as relief flooded through her. Miriam immediately moved to her side, wrapping her arms around Ruby's shoulders. "This is a miracle," Miriam said, her own voice thick with emotion. "A true miracle. God is working through this treatment, through all of us." Ruby leaned into Miriam's embrace, allowing herself to really feel the magnitude of what was happening. She was healing. Actually healing. Asher stood quietly by the door, but when Ruby looked over at him, she saw his eyes were shining too. "I haven't," he started, then had to clear his throat before continuing. "I haven't felt hope like this in years, not since Miriam first got sick." The moment hung between them all. Doctor, patient, brother, sister, each understanding the weight of what they were witnessing. Later that afternoon, Ruby found herself in the sanctuary's large kitchen with Miriam, measuring ingredients for banana bread. The counter was dusted with flour, and the sweet smell of overripe bananas filled the air. "My grandmother's recipe," Miriam explained, showing Ruby how to mash the bananas perfectly. She always said baking was good for the soul. Ruby smiled, watching as Miriam added a pinch of cinnamon without measuring. "My father used to bake," she shared. "Not often, but sometimes on Sunday mornings I'd wake up to the smell of cornbread." "Tell me more about him," Miriam encouraged gently, knowing this was a tender subject. Ruby measured out flour as she spoke. "He's a good man. Quiet but good. After Mom died, he did his best, but—" She paused, tapping excess flour off the measuring cup. "When I got sick, I think it broke something in him. He couldn't bear to watch me suffer, and I couldn't bear to make him watch." Miriam nodded understanding, adding vanilla to the bowl. "Sometimes love makes us do strange things. We think we're protecting people by pulling away." They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, folding the wet and dry ingredients together. Then Miriam accidentally dropped an eggshell in the batter, and both women burst out laughing as they tried to fish it out. "Good thing we're bakers and not brain surgeons," Ruby joked, and Miriam's laughter rang out again. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. "You have no idea how good it is to laugh like this again." The bread was in the oven by the time the rest of the team gathered for dinner. The whole dining room smelled of warm banana bread and hope. Dr. Chen raised her water glass in a gentle toast. "To progress," she said simply. "To progress," everyone echoed, and Ruby felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the fresh-baked bread they were sharing. That night, as Ruby walked back to her room, she heard a quiet voice from the direction of the balcony. She paused, recognizing Asher's distinctive tone. He was speaking so softly, she almost couldn't make out the words, but then the evening breeze carried them to her. "Thank you," he was whispering, his voice raw with emotion. "Thank you for bringing her here, for letting us help her, for giving us all hope again. Thank you for her life." Ruby stood frozen in the hallway, deeply touched by this glimpse of Asher's private gratitude. She had never thought anyone would thank God for her life again, let alone with such genuine feeling. Quietly, careful not to disturb his moment of prayer, Ruby slipped into her room and closed the door. Through her window, she could hear the chirping of crickets and the soft rustle of leaves in the night breeze. She stood there for a long moment, letting the peaceful sounds wash over her, marveling at how different everything felt from just a week ago. The darkness outside her window was alive with the sound of night insects, a gentle symphony that seemed to echo the new life stirring within her. Ruby touched her hand to the window glass, feeling the cool surface beneath her fingers that had more sensation now than they'd had in years. The afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the woodland path as Ruby emerged from her latest treatment session. Her steps felt lighter, more certain than they had in years. The fresh mountain air filled her lungs, carrying the sweet scent of pine and wild roses. "Ready for our walk?" Miriam called from the sanctuary's back porch, where she and Asher were waiting. She was wearing a flowing sundress, her cane hanging loosely in her grip rather than bearing her full weight as it usually did. "More than ready," Ruby replied, joining them. "I swear I could run right now." Asher smiled, but his eyes held a note of caution. "Let's stick to walking for now, but it's wonderful to see you both so energetic." They set off along the winding path, taking their time despite their improved strength. Ruby noticed how Miriam moved with more grace than before, her steps growing surer as they went. The transformation in both women was remarkable. Where once there had been pain and hesitation, now there was growing confidence. "The treatments are working better than we dared hope," Asher commented, watching them both with barely contained joy. "The regenerative markers in both your systems are showing incredible progress." "It feels like waking up," Miriam said softly. "Like coming back to life." Ruby nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "I keep discovering things I'd forgotten, like how it feels to walk without counting every step, or how to just breathe without thinking about it." They continued along the path, passing through patches of sunlight and shade. Birds called overhead, and somewhere in the distance, a stream bubbled over rocks. Ruby found herself noticing these small details with newfound clarity, as if her senses too were being reborn. "There's something I want to show you," Asher said after they'd walked for about 20 minutes. He gestured toward a narrow side path that Ruby hadn't noticed before. "If you're both up for a small adventure?" Miriam grinned. "Lead the way, little brother." The side path climbed gently upward, winding between old-growth trees whose branches formed a natural archway overhead. Ruby felt her heart beat faster with the slight exertion, but it was a good feeling, the kind that meant her body was working as it should, not the dangerous racing she'd grown used to. After a few minutes, the path opened suddenly onto a natural stone overlook. Ruby gasped as the view spread out before them. A vast valley stretched below, painted in shades of green and gold. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks touched with lingering snow, despite the summer warmth. "Oh, Asher," she breathed. "It's beautiful." He stood beside her at the railing, his eyes on the horizon. "This is my thinking spot. When things get overwhelming in the lab, or when I need to remember why we keep fighting, I come here." Miriam settled onto a wooden bench built into the rock face, letting out a contented sigh. "I haven't been up here in months," she said. "I'd forgotten how peaceful it is." Ruby gripped the railing, feeling the rough wood under her palms. The valley below seemed to pulse with life, trees swaying in the breeze, birds wheeling through the air, clouds casting moving shadows across the landscape. She felt something shift deep inside her, like a door opening that she'd thought was permanently locked. "I never thought I'd see something like this again," she whispered. "I'd stopped letting myself imagine any kind of future." Asher turned to look at her, his expression gentle. "And now?" "Now." Ruby took a deep breath, tasting the clean mountain air. "Now I'm starting to wonder what else might be possible." They stayed at the overlook until the sun began to sink toward the western peaks, casting long shadows across the valley. The walk back was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts, but it was a comfortable silence full of shared understanding. That evening, Ruby settled into the window seat in her room with a book she'd borrowed from Miriam's library. The words blurred slightly as fatigue from the day's activities caught up with her, but it was a good kind of tired, the kind that promised deep, healing sleep. Just as she was about to turn another page, raised voices from the hallway caught her attention. She recognized Ash's usually calm tone, now sharp with anger. "Explain these data transfers, Dr. Reeves. None of them were authorized through proper channels." "I don't know what you're talking about." Dr. Reeves's voice was cold, defensive. "I've followed all protocols." "Don't lie to me." Ash's words were clipped. "I have the logs right here. External communications, encrypted files. What are you sending, and to whom?" "Are you accusing me of something, Mr. Vale?" The hostility in Reeves's voice was unmistakable now. "Because I suggest you choose your next words very carefully. I'm giving you one chance to come clean. If there's someone pressuring you, you don't own this research." Reeves snapped. "You don't own her. The medical community has a right to—" "The medical community will have access to everything through proper channels, once we're certain the treatments are safe and stable. You know this. So I'll ask again, what are you really doing?" There was a long pause, then the sound of footsteps stalking away. Ruby sat frozen in her window seat, her heart pounding. She'd never heard Asher sound so angry, or Dr. Reeves so threatening. The night deepened around the sanctuary, and eventually Ruby fell into an uneasy sleep. Her dreams were troubled, full of shadowy figures and half-heard voices. Just after midnight, she jolted awake. A metallic sound, faint but distinct, had cut through her sleep. She lay still, listening intently, wondering if she'd imagined it. But she hadn't. In the darkness beyond the sanctuary's walls, figures moved with practiced stealth. They slipped past motion sensors whose locations they somehow knew, avoided security cameras whose blind spots had been mapped out in advance. Each movement was calculated, coordinated, guided by inside knowledge that could have come from only one source. The sanctuary's outer perimeter had been breached. The sanctuary's night silence shattered as emergency lights flooded the corridors with pulsing red. Ruby bolted upright in bed, heart hammering as the security alarm's wail pierced the darkness. Her door burst open, and Asher appeared, silhouetted, against the flashing lights. "Ruby, stay behind me," he ordered, voice tight with urgency. "We need to move. Now." She scrambled from the bed, bare feet hitting the cold floor as distant gunfire crackled through the building. The sound made her blood run cold. "What's happening?" she whispered, stumbling as Asher pulled her into the hallway. "Intruders in the research wing." His jaw clenched as he guided her forward, one arm protectively in front of her. "They're after you?" Through windows overlooking the courtyard, Ruby caught glimpses of black-clad figures moving with military precision. Their tactical gear gleamed dully in the emergency lights as they converged on the building's east wing, where the labs were located. Security Chief Dawson's voice crackled over the intercom. "Full lockdown initiated. All personnel to secure locations. This is not a drill. Repeat, full lockdown initiated." Metal shutters began descending over windows and doorways as the sanctuary's defenses engaged. The sound of boots on tile echoed through adjacent corridors, accompanied by sharp commands and the metallic click of weapons being readied. "Stay close," Asher murmured, leading Ruby down a service hallway she'd never noticed before. "There's a safe room below ground level. We've drilled for this." Ruby's legs trembled as they hurried through the dimly lit passage. Her improved strength from the treatments helped, but fear made her movements clumsy. How did they find us? How did they get past security? Asher's expression darkened. Someone helped them. The perimeter sensors should have... More gunfire erupted, closer now, followed by shouting and the crash of breaking glass. Ruby flinched, pressing closer to Asher's back as they reached a maintenance door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Asher pulled out his keycard, hands steady despite the chaos. Once we're inside, there's an elevator that leads to... Going somewhere? The cold voice froze them both. Dr. Reeves stepped out from behind a storage rack, blocking their path. In his hand, a pistol gleamed beneath the emergency lights. Dr. Reeves? Ruby's voice cracked with disbelief. What are you doing? Step away from her, Mr. Vale. Reeves's professional manner had vanished, replaced by hard-edged determination. This doesn't have to get messy. Asher shifted, keeping himself between Ruby and the gun. You sold us out. All this time, you were feeding information to people who understand what's really at stake. Reeves cut in. Do you think you can control this discovery? That you alone should decide how it's developed, who profits? He gestured with the weapon. The company I work for has resources you can't imagine. They'll make sure the cure reaches its full potential. You mean they'll bury it? Asher snarled. Patent it, price it out of reach, control who lives and who dies. I've seen how they operate. Ruby's mind raced, remembering the unauthorized data transfers, Reeves's strange intensity during her examinations. You were never here to help us. I'm trying to help everyone. Reeves insisted. Now come with me, Ruby. Don't make this difficult. More footsteps approached, heavy boots, multiple sets. Ruby glanced desperately at the maintenance door, so close, yet unreachable. Asher tensed beside her. Ruby, when I move, run for the... Reeves fired a warning shot into the ceiling. The blast was deafening in the confined space. Don't be stupid, Vale. You're not armed. You can't win this! 3 men in tactical gear appeared behind them, weapons raised. Ruby felt the fight drain out of her, as rough hands grabbed her arms, pulling her away from Asher. No! Asher lunged forward but froze as Reeves's gun pressed against his chest. She'll be well taken care of. Reeves said coldly. Better hope you're smart enough to stay alive until my employers contact you with terms. Ruby struggled against her captors, but their grip was iron. They dragged her backward, toward an emergency exit she could now see was propped open. Outside, engine noise rumbled, a waiting vehicle. Asher! She cried out, terror closing her throat. Ruby! He started forward again, but Reeves swung the pistol hard against his temple. Asher stumbled, blood trickling down his face. The last thing Ruby saw as they forced her through the door was Miriam appearing at the far end of the corridor, her face white with horror. Then the night air hit her skin, and she was being shoved into a black SUV. Doors slammed, tires squealed, and the sanctuary disappeared into darkness as they sped down the mountain road. Back in the corridor, Asher pulled himself to his feet, ignoring the blood dripping from his temple. Miriam hurried to him, her hands trembling as she touched his face. Asher, they took her. They took Ruby. He wrapped his sister in a fierce embrace, his whole body shaking with rage and determination. Through clenched teeth, he made a vow that echoed through the now silent hallway. I will bring Ruby home. Ruby's head throbbed as consciousness slowly returned. The first thing she noticed was the musty smell, different from the sanctuary's clean mountain air. Her eyes fluttered open to dim, fluorescent lighting that flickered overhead, casting weird shadows across concrete walls. She tried to move but found her wrists and ankles secured to a metal chair. Good morning, Miss Carrow. Dr. Reeves's familiar voice carried across the space. I apologize for the restraints, but we couldn't risk you harming yourself. Ruby blinked, taking in her surroundings. She appeared to be in some kind of warehouse, its vast space divided into makeshift lab areas with portable equipment. Plastic sheeting created temporary walls, and extension cords snaked across the floor like black rivers. Where am I? Her throat felt raw. Somewhere secure. Reeves replied, checking something on a tablet. Somewhere we can work without interference. Ruby tested her restraints carefully. Work on what? On unlocking the fortune inside your DNA. Reeves set down his tablet and approached her chair. Do you have any idea what your regenerative protein is worth? We're talking billions of dollars, but only if it's properly controlled, properly monetized. The way he said monetized made Ruby's skin crawl. Is that why you betrayed Asher? For money? Money. This is about so much more than money. Reeves laughed coldly. This is about power. Control. Do you think Vale would handle this discovery responsibly? He'd give it away. Destroy the pharmaceutical industry overnight. You mean he'd help people? Ruby spat. Help people? Reeves shook his head like she was a naive child. The economy would collapse. Millions would lose jobs. Entire industries would vanish. No, this needs to be managed carefully, released slowly, profitably. He picked up a file from a nearby desk. Did you know your euthanasia approval was fast-tracked? Certain officials were very cooperative once they understood what was at stake. Your death would have simplified everything. No messy patient rights to deal with, just clean patent applications. Ruby felt sick. You tried to kill me to make paperwork easier. We tried to streamline an inevitable process. You were going to die anyway. He flipped through the file, until Vale interfered. I was never really a burden to anyone, was I? Ruby's voice shook with anger. I was a threat. To you. To your corporate masters. A threat implies malicious intent. Reeves closed the file. You're more like a resource that needs proper management. Throughout the day, Ruby was subjected to endless scans and questions. They drew blood, took tissue samples, recorded her vital signs. She answered their questions with minimal information, claiming exhaustion whenever possible. I need rest, she would say. The treatments at the sanctuary took a lot out of me. Reeves seemed to accept this, not wanting to risk damaging his valuable resource. Between tests, Ruby carefully studied her surroundings. She counted 4 armed guards who rotated shifts by the exits. The main door was heavy steel, but she spotted a fire exit partially hidden behind some equipment. Medical carts with various tools were stationed near the exam areas. Most importantly, she noticed the night shift guards were less attentive, often distracted by their phones. As evening approached, Ruby was returned to the metal chair. Her arms ached from the restraints, but she had discovered something promising. A loose bracket on the exam table had come away in her hand during the last round of tests. While pretending to doze, she worked the metal edge against her restraints, carefully weakening the material. Darkness fell outside the high warehouse windows. The night shift arrived, and the overhead lights dimmed to a skeleton crew setting. Ruby continued her slow, methodical work with the bracket, her movements hidden by the shadows. I'm not dying for them, she whispered to herself, determination hardening her voice. Not this time. The words were a promise, to herself, to Asher, to everyone who had helped her rediscover her will to live. She wasn't just a protein to be harvested or a patent to be filed. She was a person who deserved to choose her own path, and she chose to fight. Ruby's fingers trembled as she worked the final threads of the restraint binding her right wrist. After hours of careful sawing with the metal bracket, she felt the material finally giving way. Her heart pounded against her ribs, knowing this might be her only chance at freedom. The warehouse had grown quieter as afternoon settled in, with only the hum of equipment and occasional footsteps breaking the silence. 2 guards stood near the main entrance, looking bored as they scrolled through their phones. Through the high windows, Ruby could see the sun beginning its descent, painting the dusty air with golden streaks. Dr. Reeves paced nearby, speaking in hushed tones on his phone. Yes, we've collected preliminary samples. No, the protein markers remain stable. I understand the urgency. Ruby kept her head down, pretending to doze while she worked. The loose bracket had left her palm raw and bleeding, but she barely felt the pain. Her focus remained absolute as the restraint threads snapped one by one. Suddenly, Reeves's phone conversation grew more heated. "What do you mean there's movement in the area?" He strode toward the door, barking orders at the guards. "Double the perimeter check, now." The moment he stepped outside, Ruby felt the restraint give way. Without hesitation, she gripped the metal bracket tight and swung hard at the nearest guard's temple. He crumpled with a grunt of surprise. The second guard reached for his weapon, but Ruby was already moving, running on legs that felt like rubber. She spotted the side door, a fire exit she'd noted earlier, and slammed through it with her shoulder. The alarm's shriek split the air as she burst into the fading daylight. Her muscles screamed in protest as she forced herself to run, each step sending shockwaves of pain through her weakened body. The warehouse complex spread out before her like a maze of metal and concrete. Shouts echoed behind her as more guards poured out of the building. Ruby ducked between towering shipping containers, their rusty walls offering temporary cover as she tried to catch her breath. "Find her," Reeves's voice carried across the yard. "She cannot leave this facility." Ruby pressed herself against a container, her chest heaving. She could hear boots crunching on gravel, moving in coordinated patterns to box her in. The sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows that both helped and hindered her ability to spot approaching threats. A beam of light swept past her hiding spot. Ruby held her breath, wondering if her thundering heartbeat would give her away. She needed to keep moving, but her legs felt heavier with each passing minute. The treatments at the sanctuary had improved her condition, but she was far from fully recovered. Through gaps between the containers, she caught glimpses of armed men moving with tactical precision. Their rifles looked impossibly large in the growing darkness. Ruby forced herself to think clearly despite her terror. She couldn't stay here. They would find her eventually. She needed to make a break for the perimeter fence she'd spotted earlier. Just then, she noticed something new. Headlights approaching from beyond the complex. Multiple vehicles moving with purpose, their beams cutting through the gathering dusk. Ruby's heart leapt with desperate hope. Could it be? The sound of boots on metal above made her jump. A guard had climbed onto one of the containers for a better vantage point. Ruby knew she had to move now or lose her chance. Gathering every ounce of strength remaining, she pushed off from the container and ran. Shouts erupted behind her. The beam of a rifle sight danced across her back as she sprinted toward the approaching vehicles. Her legs wobbled dangerously, threatening to give out with each step, but she could see them clearly now. Black SUVs with tinted windows, exactly like the ones at Asher's sanctuary. "Stop or we'll shoot!" A guard's voice rang out. Ruby emerged from between the last row of containers into open space. The rescue vehicles had reached the fence, and she could see figures pouring out, taking up defensive positions. She recognized Asher's tall form among them, moving with urgent purpose. Time seemed to slow as she heard the distinctive click of a rifle being chambered. Ruby turned her head to see a guard taking aim, his finger tightening on the trigger. She couldn't make her legs move any faster. This was it. She was going to die just when she'd found her will to live. But suddenly Asher was there, his body slamming into the guard with crushing force. The rifle discharged harmlessly into the air as both men went down. More of Asher's team engaged the remaining guards, the sound of fists and bodies colliding filling the air. Ruby's legs finally gave out. She collapsed to her knees, watching as Asher subdued the guard with practiced efficiency. When he turned to her, his face was filled with such relief and concern that tears sprang to her eyes. "Ruby!" He rushed to her side, dropping to his knees and pulling her into his arms. She pressed her face against his chest, her whole body shaking with sobs. "I want to live!" she choked out between tears. "I want to live so badly." Asher's arms tightened around her. "You're going to live, Ruby, I promise you that." His voice was thick with emotion. "You're never going to be alone again. Never." She clung to him as the sounds of combat died down. Asher's team had quickly overwhelmed Reeves's security force. Through her tears, she saw Reeves himself being led away in restraints, his face twisted with impotent rage. "Can you stand?" Asher asked gently. When Ruby shook her head, he simply scooped her up in his arms as if she weighed nothing. "I've got you. You're safe now." The rescue van's doors were already open, waiting for them. Inside, medical equipment and comfortable seating had been prepared. Asher carried her in, never loosening his protective hold. As the doors closed and the vehicle accelerated away from the warehouse complex, Ruby felt the last of her strength leave her. She sagged against Asher's chest, finally allowing exhaustion to take over now that she was truly safe. The van sped through the gathering darkness, carrying her back to the sanctuary, back to hope, back to life. The sanctuary's floodlights illuminated the courtyard as the rescue vehicles pulled through the gates. Ruby, still wrapped in a blanket Asher had given her, felt her body relax at the sight of the familiar stone buildings. Home. Somehow, in just these few days, this place had become home. The main entrance burst open, and Miriam appeared, supported by 2 nurses. Her face was streaked with tears as she hobbled forward, refusing to wait inside. Behind her, the entire medical team spilled out into the courtyard, their relieved voices carrying through the night air. "Easy now," Asher murmured as he helped Ruby from the vehicle. Her legs were still unsteady, but she managed to stay upright with his support. Miriam reached them first, wrapping Ruby in a fierce hug that nearly knocked them both over. "Thank God," Miriam whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank God you're safe." Ruby found herself crying again as more arms encircled them. The nurses, technicians, and support staff who had become her unexpected family. Their tears mingled with whispered prayers and words of gratitude. "Let's get her inside," Dr. Chen finally said, his usually calm voice thick with emotion. "She needs a full evaluation." The medical team guided Ruby to the examination room, Asher never leaving her side. His presence felt like an anchor as the doctors began their assessment. They checked her vital signs, drew blood, and ran neural response tests while she recounted what had happened at the warehouse. "Your stress markers are significantly elevated," Dr. Chen explained, studying the results. "But I'm not seeing any permanent damage to the neural pathways we've been healing. A few days of rest should help your body recover." Asher's hand tightened on Ruby's shoulder. "I'll make sure she gets it." "I don't need a watchdog," Ruby protested weakly, but she was grateful for his protective instinct. After everything that had happened, she didn't want to be alone. The team insisted she try to sleep, providing a mild sedative to help her rest. As Ruby drifted off in her familiar room, she was aware of Asher settling into the chair beside her bed, his laptop open, but his eyes fixed on her face. Morning came with gentle sunlight filtering through the windows. Ruby woke feeling stronger, the fear from the previous day settled into a dull ache rather than sharp terror. She found Asher still in the chair, though he'd dozed off at some point, his head tilted at an awkward angle. "You'll hurt your neck sleeping like that?" she said softly. His eyes opened immediately. "Worth it to make sure you were safe." Ruby sat up slowly, memories of the warehouse flooding back. "The data Reeves collected. We need to look at it." "Ruby, you should rest." "No," she insisted. "He made me review everything while I was there. I saw something in those test results, something we've been missing in Miriam's treatment. Please, Asher, let me help." He studied her face for a long moment before nodding. I'll get the team together." An hour later, Ruby sat in the research lab surrounded by monitors displaying both her data and Miriam's. Dr. Chen and the other specialists listened intently as she explained what she'd noticed during her captivity. "The regenerative protein responds differently based on neural plasticity levels," she said, pointing to specific readings. "Reeves was forcing comparisons between my baseline results and current status. Look at how the activation patterns change when mapped against circadian rhythms." The team's excitement grew as they processed the implications. Dr. Chen quickly began adjusting treatment parameters, incorporating the new variables Ruby had identified. By early afternoon, they were ready to attempt an updated therapy session with Miriam. "Are you sure about this?" Asher asked his sister as she settled into the treatment chair. Miriam smiled serenely. "I trust Ruby completely." The medical team initiated the modified protocol while Ruby and Asher watched from behind the observation window. Minutes ticked by as they monitored Miriam's neural readings. Suddenly, Dr. Chen straightened, his eyes wide. "Look at this," he breathed, pointing to the display. "The signal patterns, they're stabilizing in real time." Ruby pressed her hands against the glass as she watched the readings normalize. Beside her, Asher made a choked sound of disbelief and joy. When the treatment ended, Miriam opened her eyes, blinking slowly. "I feel," she whispered, then stopped, tears forming. "I feel clear, like a fog has lifted." She raised her hand, and it moved smoothly, without the tremor that had plagued her for so long. The room erupted in celebration, doctors hugging, nurses crying, technicians staring at the readings in amazement. Miriam turned to look through the window, her gaze finding Ruby. Her voice was soft, but carried clearly through the speaker system. "Ruby, you saved me." The words hung in the air like a benediction, a moment of pure grace that transformed all the fear and pain into something beautiful. Ruby felt Asher's arm slip around her shoulders, steadying her as happy tears spilled down her cheeks. In saving herself, she had found the key to saving others. The gift of life, given and received, had come full circle. The morning sun had barely crested the mountain peaks when the first news alerts began flooding phones throughout the sanctuary. Ruby watched from the comfort of the main living area as major networks interrupted their regular programming with breaking headlines about a revolutionary medical breakthrough. Miracle cure discovered. Billionaire inventor Asher Vale announces treatment for degenerative neural disease. Scrolled across the bottom of the television screen. Dr. Chen rushed into the room, tablet in hand. "It's everywhere. Every major outlet is covering the story." He turned up the volume as a serious-looking anchor delivered the latest updates. In a stunning development, federal authorities have arrested Dr. James Reeves and several high-ranking pharmaceutical executives in connection with an alleged conspiracy to suppress groundbreaking medical research. Sources say the group deliberately fast-tracked euthanasia approvals for patients whose genetic profiles threatened their profit margins. Ruby's hands trembled slightly as she watched footage of Reeves being led away in handcuffs, his polished facade finally cracking. FBI agents carried boxes of evidence from his office while reporters shouted questions. Asher appeared beside her, straightening his tie. "The press conference starts in an hour. Are you sure you don't want to attend?" "I'm not ready for cameras," Ruby said softly. "This is your moment." He shook his head. "This is your miracle. I'm just the messenger." The sanctuary's security team escorted Asher to a waiting helicopter, while Ruby, Miriam, and the medical staff gathered in the conference room to watch the press conference live. The room fell silent as Asher took the podium at Vale Industries headquarters, cameras flashing. "Good morning," he began, his usual reserved demeanor giving way to barely contained emotion. Today I stand before you not just as CEO of Vale Industries, but as a brother who has witnessed a miracle. Thanks to the extraordinary courage and unique genetic profile of one remarkable woman, we have developed a cure for the degenerative neural condition that has claimed so many lives. Reporters clamored with questions, but Asher raised his hand for silence. This treatment will not be patented or price gouged. Vale Industries will make it available at cost to every hospital and clinic worldwide. No one should have to choose death because they cannot afford to live. As applause erupted, Ruby felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Miriam squeezed her hand. "You've changed everything," she whispered. The morning passed in a blur of news coverage and celebration, but Ruby felt increasingly drawn to make one crucial call. After lunch, she retreated to her room and pulled out her phone, staring at her father's number. Taking a deep breath, she pressed dial. It rang twice before his familiar voice answered, tentative and hopeful. "Ruby. Daddy," she whispered, her voice breaking. A choked sob came through the line. "Baby, girl, I've been watching the news. I can't believe it. Are you really getting better?" "I am," she said, wiping her eyes. "But I needed to tell you something. I'm sorry I pushed you away. I thought I was protecting you from watching me die." "No, Ruby, I'm the one who's sorry." Her father's voice cracked with emotion. "I was so scared of losing you like I lost your mama that I let that fear keep me from being there when you needed me most. Can you ever forgive me?" "Already have," Ruby assured him, her heart feeling lighter than it had in years. "Maybe you could come visit soon. Meet the people who helped save me?" "Just try and stop me," he said, and they both laughed through their tears. That evening, the sanctuary staff organized an intimate celebration dinner. The dining room glowed with candlelight as everyone gathered around the long table. Chef Marina had outdone herself with all of Ruby's favorite comfort foods: fried chicken, mac and cheese, collard greens, and warm peach cobbler for dessert. Miriam stood, raising her glass. A toast to new beginnings, renewed faith, and the precious gift of tomorrow. "To tomorrow," everyone echoed, but Ruby noticed Asher's eyes remained fixed on her face, filled with something deeper than simple admiration. After the main course, Dr. Chen called for Ruby to say a few words. She hesitated, then slowly rose to her feet. "A few weeks ago, I thought my life had no value except in its ending," she began quietly. "I believed I was nothing but a burden, that my death would be a gift to those I loved. But standing here tonight, I understand something profound. Every life has sacred worth, not because of what we can do or contribute, but simply because we exist. We're all miracles, every one of us, and sometimes our darkest moments lead us to our greatest light." Applause and tears followed her words. As servers cleared the dessert plates, Ruby slipped away to the balcony, needing a moment alone. The night air carried the scent of pine and distant rain. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, marveling at how different everything felt from that terrible Tuesday when she'd signed her life away. The mountain wind brushed her face like a gentle caress, and Ruby smiled, realizing with quiet certainty that she not only wanted her tomorrows, she was ready to embrace them fully, whatever they might bring. For the first time in years, the future felt like a gift rather than a burden, and her heart was open to all its possibilities. Sunlight streamed through the mountain mist, casting golden ribbons across the sanctuary grounds. Ruby stood at her bedroom window, adjusting the soft blue blazer she'd chosen for today's event. 1 month had transformed not just her body, but her entire world. The tremors that once plagued her hands had vanished. Her steps, previously uncertain, now carried her with confidence. She touched the small silver pendant at her neck, a gift from Miriam, inscribed with the words, "Hope Renewed." The morning dew still clung to the sanctuary gardens below, where half a dozen new patients walked the winding paths with their therapists. Their presence filled Ruby with a profound sense of purpose. "Look at you," came Miriam's warm voice from the doorway. "Ready to change more lives?" Ruby turned to see her friend standing tall and elegant, no cane in sight. The transformation in Miriam never failed to amaze her. The older woman practically glowed with vitality. "Still feels like a dream sometimes," Ruby admitted, smoothing her skirt. "A month ago, I couldn't imagine being here. Now I'm about to speak to hundreds of people about hope." Miriam crossed the room and took Ruby's hands in hers. "Because you lived it. You walked through the valley of despair and came out carrying light." Her eyes welled with tears. "You gave me my life back, Ruby. You gave all these people a chance they never thought they'd have." Ruby squeezed Miriam's hands. "God had a bigger plan than either of us could see. He always does." Miriam smiled. "The Foundation's already received over 5,000 applications for treatment. 5,000 lives that might have ended too soon, just like yours almost did." Looking out at the gardens again, Ruby watched a young woman taking hesitant steps between parallel bars, her therapist offering gentle encouragement. Just last week, that same patient had arrived in a wheelchair, convinced she'd never walk again. "Sometimes I walk through the gardens just to remind myself it's real," Ruby said softly. "All these people finding hope again, their families getting second chances. It's overwhelming in the best possible way." Miriam wrapped her in a warm hug. "And you'll be their voice, their advocate. Who better to understand their journey than someone who's walked it?" A knock at the door frame drew their attention. Asher stood there, looking sharp in a charcoal suit, his usual intensity softened by a gentle smile. "The car's ready whenever you are," he said, "though I hate to interrupt this moment." Miriam gave Ruby one final squeeze before stepping back. "I'll see you both at the Foundation later. I'm leading the morning prayer circle first." As Miriam left, Asher gestured to the garden path. "Walk with me." Ruby nodded, falling into step beside him as they made their way down to the grounds. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and late summer flowers. New construction expanded in the distance, additional patient wings to accommodate the growing need. They paused at the garden gate, where just weeks ago Ruby had taken her first unassisted steps during recovery. Asher turned to face her, his expression earnest. "I never properly thanked you," he said quietly. Ruby tilted her head. "For what?" "For choosing to live." His voice carried raw emotion. "When you agreed to stay, to fight, you didn't just save yourself. You saved Miriam. You saved thousands we don't even know yet. Your courage changed everything." "I didn't feel very courageous at the time," Ruby admitted. "I was angry, scared, convinced you were wrong about me." "But you stayed anyway. That's what courage is, facing the unknown even when you're terrified." He gestured to the flourishing sanctuary around them. "Look what grew from that single choice." Ruby watched a family embracing near the therapy center, tears and laughter mingling as their loved one showed off newly restored mobility. "I never thought my life would mean anything this important," she said softly. "I was so ready to give up, to disappear. But now I understand. We're all meant for something greater than our pain." Asher checked his watch reluctantly. "We should head out soon. There are already families lining up at the Foundation." Ruby gathered her notebook and phone, tucking them into her leather portfolio, a gift from the sanctuary staff. As they walked to the waiting car, she felt a profound sense of rightness, of stepping into a purpose she never could have imagined that terrible Tuesday when she'd signed her life away. The drive into the city passed quickly as Ruby reviewed her notes for the speech. The newly established Human Dignity and Medical Hope Foundation occupied a beautiful historic building, its limestone facade restored to glory. The foundation's motto was carved above the entrance: "Every life has purpose." Inside, the grand auditorium buzzed with anticipation. Hundreds of patients and families filled the seats, some in wheelchairs, others with mobility aids, all wearing expressions of cautious hope. Ruby recognized that look. She'd worn it herself not so long ago. Asher squeezed her hand before heading to his seat in the front row beside Miriam. Ruby took a deep breath, smoothed her blazer, and walked onto the stage as the room fell silent. The spotlight felt warm on her face as she stepped to the podium. Looking out at all those desperate, hopeful faces, Ruby felt tears prick her eyes. But her voice rang clear and strong as she began. "My story began the day I thought it would end. And I'm here to tell you, your life matters more than you know." The truth of those words filled her heart as she witnessed hope dawning in hundreds of eyes. This was why she had lived. This was why she had stayed. And this was only the beginning. Ruby's heels clicked softly against the marble floors of the sanctuary's reception hall as she made her way through the bustling morning crowd. Her arms cradled a thick stack of letters, hundreds of handwritten stories from patients whose lives had been transformed by the treatment. Each envelope held someone's journey from despair to hope. As she walked, whispers of recognition followed her. "That's her, the woman from the broadcast. She's the one who helped discover the cure." A young woman in a wheelchair reached out to touch her hand, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "My sister starts treatment next week because of you." Ruby smiled warmly, squeezing the woman's hand. These moments still took her breath away. The raw gratitude, the renewed hope in their eyes. Just 2 months ago, she had been the one without hope, signing papers to end her life. Now here she was, walking these halls as living proof that miracles existed. The conference room was quiet when she entered, early morning light streaming through tall windows. She spread the letters across the polished table, reading snippets of joy and relief. A father able to dance at his daughter's wedding. A teacher returning to her classroom. A musician playing piano again after years of silence. Asher arrived right on schedule, 2 coffee cups in hand. He passed one to Ruby. She smiled at how he remembered exactly how she liked it. "These came in just this week," she said, gesturing to the letters. "And there are more arriving every day." Asher picked up one of the letters, scanning its contents. "Each one of these represents a family restored," he said softly. Ruby took a deep breath. "That's actually what I wanted to discuss. After speaking with so many families, hearing their stories." She met his eyes. "I want to do more than just advocacy. These people need support systems, real programs to help them through the darkest moments, like the ones I faced. No one should have to feel as alone as I did." Asher set down the letter, giving Ruby his full attention. "What exactly did you have in mind? Support groups, counseling services, family connection programs?" Ruby explained, her voice growing passionate. "The treatment heals bodies, but we need to heal spirits too. I've been there. I know what it's like to lose hope completely. I want to build something that catches people before they fall that far." A slow smile spread across Asher's face. "I was hoping you'd say something like that." He pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "The foundation needs your voice, not just as a survivor, but as a leader. This is a proposal for a new position. Director of Patient Support and Emotional Wellness. Full authority to develop and oversee all the programs you just described." Ruby's hands trembled slightly as she opened the folder. "You're serious?" "Completely. No one understands this journey better than you do. Help us build what you needed most when you were in their shoes?" That evening, Ruby sat with Miriam on the sanctuary's wide porch, sharing tea and discussing the new role. Miriam's eyes sparkled with pride. God doesn't waste pain, Ruby. He's using every step of your journey to light the way for others. Later, Ruby walked alone to the overlook above the valley. The setting sun painted the sky in deep golds and purples, the same view that had first shown her a glimpse of future possibility during those early days of treatment. She thought about the frightened, hopeless woman she'd been, signing away her life in that sterile hospital room. If only she could tell that version of herself what lay ahead. Watching the last rays of sunlight fade into dusk, Ruby whispered into the gentle breeze, I lived, so now I'm going to help others live too. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.